Okay, the meeting will come to order. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Notice is hereby given that a special town meeting of the electors and citizens qualified to vote in town meetings of the town of Guilford, Connecticut will be held at the Community Center on Church Street, Monday, December 3rd, 2018 at 8:30 a.m. to consider and act on the following. Acquiring a conservation easement for Long Hill Estates West Subdivision, Assessors Map 57, Lot 205, in accordance with Connecticut General Statutes 47-42C and Town Charter 7-7. Okay.
Thank you. I will be acting as a moderator
Okay.
tonight.
Very good.
Thank you, Anna. Kevin McGee's here to talk a little bit about the easement. The conservation easement is an option given planning and zoning when approving subdivisions or particularly subdivisions. So Kevin, why don't you give us a little bit of a background on it and then in particular where and what this easement's about.
Okay, we are looking to approve a conservation easement for property located on Long Hill Road, just north of Alpha Road. It is a 8-acre property where they'll be providing us, actually the whole subdivision's 8 acres, and they'll be providing us, the town, with 1.87 acres of conservation area. This meets the requirements of the planning and zoning requirements for subdivision of 10% of land being given to the town for open space. The area for the conservation easement is shown in the green hatching on the plan here. The area does contain some wetlands and some high areas. The Inland Wetlands Commission recommended to the Planning and Zoning Commission for approval for acceptance of this, and the Planning and Zoning Commission approved this at their meeting on October 3rd, 2018.
Any questions?
You presented this to us at a previous meeting, the concept of what's coming.
Correct.
Okay,
And, for the public, this goes, the conservation easement, the town has a formal document which gets placed on the land records. It's a standard form that we use for all these conservation easements, which provide rights to the property owner and rights to the town, and it's been reviewed by town council.
Is there any cost to the town of owning and maintaining the property?
We don't own the property, so it's just monitoring. And it's just like monitoring any other properties we have or other wetland sites we have, even if they're private, so.
Making sure there's no encroachment.
No encroachment and stuff on it, correct. But yeah, it's not town owned, so there's no insurance or anything like that the town needs to worry about on it.
Thank you.
Satisfied? Good. Kevin, thank you very much. Is there a motion for the town acquires a conservation easement for Long Hill Estates West Subdivision, Assessors Map 57, Lot 205, in accordance with Connecticut General Statutes 47-42C and Town Charter 7-7? Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
And a second.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? Call the question. All in
Do we
favor?
want public input?
Oh yeah, public input. Is there anyone prior to us voting, is there anyone from the public who wanted to make a comment on this? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Recusals? Hearing none, motion carries. Kevin, thank you. And I'll entertain a motion to close the town meeting.
So moved.
In a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Recusals? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. All right.
Wow, what a big crowd.
You can stop it at this point. We're gonna.
I mean, technically, did the public vote?
The public, no, they didn't, no, they asked for input, and nobody.
Vote, we go back in the
Second.
public meeting.
In a second. All in
Town.
favor?
Aye.
At this point, we're going to open it up to the town meeting for a vote. All those in favor of acquiring the conservation easement for this property signify by saying aye.
Any town resident.
Any town resident. Any town resident. Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Recusals? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. I'd like to call the regularly scheduled Board of Selectmen meeting for Monday, December 3rd, 2018 to order. Our first order of business is Pledge of Allegiance. We don't have a flag here, but Charlie, would you lead us anyway?
Well, look at Charlie.
Who's got one on the lapel pin?
Right there we
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That's funny. Thank you, Chief. Item 2, public forum limited to 3 minutes on any agenda item. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board on anything on the agenda?
On the agenda?
On the agenda.
Nope.
Hearing none, let's move on to item 3, approved minutes of the November 19th, 2018 regular meeting. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the
Second.
minutes.
Comments, questions, changes, etc.?
I have one item. On 6.2, regarding the animal control vehicle, middle of the paragraph, it says, not the town's fault, they received $14,016 from the insurance company. That should probably reflect the other driver's insurance company. Where's Tracy? Okay,
Anything else? I had nothing.
that was it for me.
No one else? Call the question as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
I abstain.
Recusals? Hearing none, motion carries. Item 4, bond counsel, Matt Ritter, and who is bond counsel with Shipman and Goodman, who's been working with us for nearly a year now, I think. Today marks a year from the first time this board was constituted. So, Matt, welcome to Guilford.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. We have 2 items on the agenda. The first of which is 4.1, consider and take possible action on a resolution recommending a special appropriation of $3.1 million for additional costs for the 2017 Mulberry Point Water Main Extension Project. By way of a little bit of background, we went out to bid late fall, or late spring, early summer. We thought we had a low bidder that was a responsible low bidder that fell somewhat within the guidelines of the original expectations for the cost of the project. As we got closer to contract signature, the low bidder backed out. And the next lowest bidder was a little over, almost $1 million more expensive than the apparent low bidder. When we put this out to bid, there was a significant range. I think the range went from, on the construction piece alone, from about $2.3 million to somewhere around $6 million. So it was a huge spread. On the advice of counsel, as well as bond counsel, in-house counsel, and one of our construction attorneys, as well as discussions with the water company, we thought it was most appropriate to go back out to bid. We did so several weeks ago, and we had I think we had 5 total bids this time around. They were all much closer to each other, which signified that they were probably more accurate. At this point, we've identified a low bidder who is about $2.6 million more expensive than the low bidder the first time around. The challenge here is the appropriation that we made back in 2017 needs to be revised to accommodate a nearly $3.1 million increase in the cost. That 2.6, 2.7 plus a contingency, and there are also some other engineering costs that have been layered onto this, as well as some consideration for Native American artifacts in the area. So we had to hire an engineering firm and DEP's request. But request or insistence? I think insistence was probably a better way to put it. It's usually insistence. So. The ask is for this, for a town meeting for additional appropriation of $3.1 million so that we can move forward with this project. And you'll see the resolution is written in such a fashion, and the use of the town meeting is completely appropriate with town charter. and Matt Ritter can talk a little bit about that. We had previously authorized bonds, but going back to authorize additional bonds would require a referendum. But because we are merely going with adding an additional appropriation with the additional amount to be expended to be recouped over a variety of ways, including state and potentially federal funding, as well as the burden being passed along to the 145 property owners who are impacted, in front of whose homes the new water main will go through.
And
So,
none of it to be recouped from the general fund.
and agreed. Thank you. So the ask today for the first of these questions is for the Board of Finance, for us to recommend to the Board of Finance an additional appropriation of $3.1 million. I'm going to turn it over to Matt and Mary Jane a little bit, if you wouldn't mind. What did I miss?
No, I mean, Mr. First Selectman, I think that was a pretty good summary. I would add a couple of things just looking at the resolution here, and a couple points I think are important for the audience. So right now, there's a special appropriation of $3.1 million. That may not be what's necessary for the project. I mean, when they get in there, the construction could be less. So we tried to give you some wiggle room, a contingency fund, but that number could come down. Number two, in the third whereas clause, we tried to lay out the funding that's been received to date to help offset the cost of the project, because the ultimate backstop is special assessments levied against the property owners. You have received a $450,000 grant this past September from the State Bond Commission. You have the Clean Water Fund program, which is going to provide both a grant and a low-interest loan. So the town has done a lot to try to reduce the cost of the project. There might be additional funds. What makes this unique, and the reason we have to do this right now, is the town has to advance funds for two reasons. One, in order to get the Clean Water Fund and get your application in by the end of the year, which is the deadline, you have to have an appropriation in place for the entire project. So you couldn't wait and see what the project costs and kind of do it piecemeal. The Clean Water Fund requirement is that it's done and you know the total appropriation or what it will not exceed. So that's one of the deadlines. The second thing is the backstop, the special assessments. We don't know what they're going to be because it depends on what the final project cost is and what other grants come in from the state of Connecticut or federal funds. But once we cannot levy any assessments against properties until the work is completed, which will take about 18 months. So after the 18-month cycle, after all the grants are taken away, you will know what the town had to advance. It's probably going to be a couple $1 million. That's probably a rough estimate. And then that will begin the assessment process against those property owners. There'll be a public hearing, there'll be notice, there'll be the right of appeal, and so there is a legal process that has to play out. But because of those two reasons, the town has to advance these funds. You guys are still limited as a town from the Clean Water Fund transaction to that $3.4 million, which was authorized by the voters of Guilford back in May of 2017. But as the first selectman explained, a special appropriation under your charter, because it's exceeding 1% of your total budget here, has to go to a special town meeting. But you are not authorizing the town to borrow any more money. And so the resolution will clearly state that you're capped at 3.4 from Clean Water Fund. So just a couple of things I wanted to, Mary Jane, I don't know if you have anything else on that. So.
No, you guys did well.
I don't know if you want to say your efforts with the
I
bond
was just
commission.
going to talk about that. When it became apparent that the costs were going to exceed the original projections, upon which, in good faith, the community voted to approve this project, and the residents were anticipating in terms of assessment costs for them. I reached out to Sean Scanlon, our state rep, who immediately went and talked to the governor's office as well as Democratic leadership in the House to garner some support. And we were granted, at one point, we had a commitment for $1.255 million, which at the time of the original low bidder, that would have brought in enough funds to actually reduce the anticipated assessment based on the original projections. Mary Jane and I were jumping up and down on a Friday at lunchtime because it looked terrific. By 4 o'clock, the low bidder pulled out, and we were back.
That was the caveat that got us here today.
Right. And when that bidder backed out, we did what was appropriate. We went back to the governor's office and said, we don't have a low bidder. In all fairness and honesty, the governor's office on the bond commission said they were willing to support this project, but and basically gave us a down payment, or what could be considered a down payment of $450,000. realizing that we had an original commitment of $1.255 million. So the anticipation is that over time, we will be able to go back to the bond commission for additional consideration for funding. And we also will be scouring federal opportunities for additional grants and funding so that we can make the best efforts to keep the residents as close to the cost, the original projected cost, as possible. I think that's it for me. Questions? Anyone?
I assume that the residents, or the 140 some odd citizens, are aware of the situation.
They are, Charlie. And in fact, I met with Sue Robbins and Mike Mizell just last week, but we've kept them abreast of this, and Melissa is also here. We've kept them abreast of the developments. And quite honestly, we didn't have to reach out to tell them that. They have a vested interest, and they've been pretty much knocking on the door to find out what's going on.
We want them to be part of it. I mean, there's no question. The other question is, what is the timing from today that we would actually? I mean, we're going to pursue other avenues for funding at this point, right?
Exactly.
And how much time do we have to do that?
Up until the project closes.
Right, the assessments will not be
Oh,
determined until the project is
closes. I was
actually
thinking of it at the
complete.
start. Okay, that
Right.
makes sense. Sure.
We'll be fronting those costs until the project is 100% complete. So we have all of that time to seek other funding.
And I will just add, we're also meeting, Matt called a meeting with the water company to put as much pressure on them as possible.
Yeah, we just have to keep all avenues.
Yep.
To change their contribution or speed it up, or what's
See if
See if
we
they'll
can go back
I
to
mean,
All
it's
the
a long
above.
shot, I'm told it's a long shot.
Yeah.
I mean, I've consulted Jeff D'Onofrio, outside counsel on it,
Yeah.
but it's worth a try, and we're going
Right.
to try. And
Right. So the underlying bonding is not changing? Okay.
Well, the company has been sold too, so we have to,
Understood.
all about, I know they have to keep their commitment, but
Right.
reinforce their commitment.
I just want to, the question if the bonding is still the same. We're actually not bonding this money. Bonding is an option, but we'll be borrowing money from Clean Water and paying that back at a low interest.
For the
So
entire project? I thought the first part of it was,
we are allowed, for the entire project.
Oh,
The idea from the very beginning was to seek the loan from Clean Water. The way our Matt can probably speak to it, the way our resolutions need to be written includes the word bonding, but we are actually not bonding any of these funds through the town.
Yeah, when you look at your 2017, the original resolution, it was clear they weren't exactly sure what they were going to do, because Clean Water Fund could have said, no, it's not a project that's going to make this deadline. We don't want to subsidize it for whatever reason. Although this is a project that they tend to like to do for drinking water. So now you're left with a situation where you decided to go with the Clean Water. We hope that the loan will be up to $3.4 million. And then you have the appropriation on top of that. And whatever we can't get from grants, you'll advance from available funds to the town, which you guys do for a lot of projects, I'm sure. And then when your auditors kind of reconcile it all at the end of the year, it will show that something's going out, but something's going to come in. And that in is grants and special assessments.
When you say we're borrowing from the fund, I had some experience on another board with this fund, but how are the rates compared to bonding? I mean, actually, bonding rates are probably going up at this point.
On the Clean Water side, they're very good. The locked rate they gave you is 2%. And right now, with interest rates going where they're going for you guys, you'd probably be in the threes, if I had to guess. Yeah.
And even the fees to acquire that funding are
Yeah.
far less than bonding. So
And-
it's a good deal for
And
everyone.
don't forget, you get the grant on top of that for $410,000 from the state, so, yeah.
So in this financial summary that you've provided to us, under the original scenario, there was a line for interest expense, and that's no longer in here. What was that?
What I do have in my new updated figures is a small amount of interest. The Clean Water Fund allows us to include the interim interest from the time the loan comes through to the time the project is done. So there's a small interest amount, but the true interest cost will be seen after the assessments go out. So when the project is done, bills will go to the 145 homeowners. If they pay it all up front, if they pay the full amount, they're done. If they choose to pay over the life of the loan through a yearly payment, that is when the interest will be attached. So
I see.
the homeowners will actually save that interest cost if they choose to pay the full amount up front.
Okay.
So that's why so yes, it's a cost to the project, but not a true cost at this
I
point.
understand, okay. And you mentioned the homeowners. Originally, there was a requirement that a certain percentage of the homeowners signed up, so to speak, for this. Is there anything that they need to do now based on more than double?
No.
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 The second half of their down payments, or their deposits was due, what was the date on the, you remember?
We have
September 1st?
the beginning of the fall,
Yeah.
but we have 93% signed up.
So more than
More
the
signed
original.
up.
So more interest, it's
We
building.
went from 83 to 93 once that final deposit was due to the water company.
Anything further? Is there a motion to recommend a special appropriation of $3.1 million for additional costs of the 2017 Mulberry Point Water Main Extension Project and the board's permission to waive the full reading of the resolution?
I'll make that motion as you've described it.
I'll second. Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals? Hearing none, motion carries. All right. Item 4.2, discuss and take possible action to set a town meeting date to consider a special appropriation for the additional costs for the 2017 Mulberry Point Water Main Extension. I'm going to read this one in its entirety. The motion that we have would be a resolution to call a special town meeting, whereas the Board of Selectmen has recommended a special appropriation of $3.1 million to pay for the additional costs of the 2017 Mulberry Point Water Main Extension Project, otherwise known as the project, and that the town finance the special appropriation by advancing funds from available funds of the town, and whereas it is anticipated the Board of Finance will also recommend a special appropriation for the project, and whereas Section 6.6 of the town charter requires town meeting approval of any special appropriations that exceed 1% of the total of the approved budget for the current fiscal year. Be it resolved that the attached detailed appropriation resolution for the project is hereby approved and subject to approval by the Board of Finance shall be submitted to a special town meeting to be held on Thursday, December 13th, 2018, in accordance with the attached warning of special town meeting, which is also hereby approved. Someone want to put that in a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any further questions? So that the town meeting will be on December 13th. It's 7:30 here at the community center. PM, yes. Good distinction. Anything further?
I can't, I'll be across the street.
Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. Matt, thank you very much for
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
coming to visit us.
Thank you.
Okay. 5. The American flag. Police Chief Hutchinson.
Good morning.
The walking flag. Good morning, Chief. Item 5.1 is to discuss and take possible action on a memorandum of understanding between the Connecticut Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection and the Town of Guilford Police Department concerning access to vehicle-related information in the NCIC system for the license plate reader project. Chief?
Morning. Just by way of a little background, if you recall last year, the Police Commission and the town through budgeting process approved the purchase of LPRs, license plate recognition systems, license plate readers. As part of that agreement, we had a plan to work with the Connecticut State Police on a pilot program where they would manage the data. They own the server, saved us money in regards to purchasing that hardware and managing the data. But in order to participate in that, we're at the point where we need to sign a memorandum of understanding between the state and ourselves to complete that process and then purchase the LPRs. This agreement has been reviewed by town council. It's been, the police commission's aware of it and approved this well back. So we're looking for the Board of Selectmen to approve the MOU and then to have Mr. Hoey sign it on behalf of the town.
Chief, the use, do we already have one reader?
We don't have them in
We don't
place
have a
yet. We
reader.
have to do
The
this
MOU
first.
has to be signed before you can actually start to use it.
Correct.
Okay. Any further questions?
There was one item in the list of conditions that just struck me as odd. I mean, the first item under section 2, it says, use the system for law enforcement purposes only. I'm not
Are
quite.
you reading the MOU, or are you?
I'm reading your memorandum, actually. Or, it's the MOU, yes, it is the MOU. So Roman numeral 3.
Oh, 3.
Oh, 4, excuse me, 4
Okay.
dot 2. Roman numeral 4, number 2, sub A. Use it for law enforcement purposes only. I mean, as opposed to like revenue, I'm not sure what other purpose this thing could.
Yeah, it's law
possibly serve.
enforcement purposes, so it's not necessarily used, we're not gonna go using it for, revenue collection, or, people can't come to us and say, hey, can you go, check the plates on, we have to have some investigation, basically. There has to be, in the course of some investigation, that we're using this.
Actually, Janice and I had been having some discussions around the waste transfer station, and there is potential, there's a concern that out-of-town residents may in fact be using it because we're not checking, we're not making them provide
ID.
ID. So I had asked the chief whether or not this device could be used, set it up on a Saturday or a Tuesday, just to check and see what percentage were registered to Guilford
Okay.
cars. The chief informed me because of that provision, but we
So
can't.
that would be an
we can't-
administrative purpose as
Exactly.
opposed to this law
Right,
enforcement purpose.
yeah, and these are, we want to be real careful about the way we use these things. We're not looking to go beyond the scope of what we intended, and there's a lot of close looks at this as to what it's being used for. So we don't really want to, we're not looking to go spy on people or do anything like that. It's a passive reader, and if you read the, our policies and the MOU, even if you have a hit, what you call, essentially the reader takes pictures of license plates. It has a hot list in there that's updated every 24 hours. It would be wanted persons, silver alerts, amber alerts, and criminal activity related items. Even if we get a hit off the hot list, we still have to confirm before we even take any law enforcement
With
action.
the state police.
Through our computer systems. So
Okay.
this is updated every 24 hours, but there's other systems that is tied to that we then need to verify both visually and electronically, sometimes with a phone call, to make sure before we do something that we're not acting on old information or inaccurate information. Because sometimes the system might, it might read a different state's plate as a Connecticut plate, or vice versa, or it might misread a number. So we don't just wait for the beep and start stopping people. It's really important to make sure that we do this appropriately so that we're not misusing it. And there's a lot of checks and balances in place, both through the MOU and within our department policy on that.
Is the system coordinated with other states?
If there's silver alerts, if there's high-level wanted
Stolen vehicles?
stolen
things like
vehicles,
that.
things like that.
So
But
it-
as far as the data that we collect, the agreement we have is our data can be viewed and shared by those operating under the MOU. Because we're working with the state, they can view our data and use it as the MOU states, and we can use theirs as well.
So if we have a stolen vehicle in Guilford,
Yeah.
we register the number with this system, and do other states become aware of that stolen
Yeah,
vehicle?
see, this,
at
that
point?
happens outside of the LPR system. That happens through Collect, NCIC. It's a different computer system. So that's entered in permanently. What this does is it reads every plate that goes by, and it says, hey, I think plate number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 just went by, and then you verify that.
So you're saying that a stolen vehicle from Guilford
Mm-hmm.
goes into some other system and is not coordinated with this system?
No, it is coordinated with system. So here's how it works differently. So if there's a stolen car from Guilford,
Right.
the only way an officer from another town is going to know whether that's stolen is if they look at that car and have a reason to enter the plate into the Collect NCIC system. This is a passive reader. So this system actually reads everything that's going by, has 3 cameras on it, and it reads every single
Okay.
plate.
All right, let me ask you this question. How widespread is this system within the towns of this state?
It's pretty widespread, but this is unique in that the state doesn't have an MOU with all the towns that they're operating with. So this is an agreement with Cheshire, Guilford, Shelton, and the state police. It's a pilot program for them to store and share the data on their servers. It also gives us an advantage in purchasing on the LPRs, and you have a consistency with systems.
It almost seems like this MOU is a attempt to control it a little bit more so than in general. So
Control
that it isn't used as a fundraiser is what it comes down to.
Well, I think it's an attempt to make sure it's being used appropriately.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, sure. And I think it's a good idea to, participate in a, progressive plan with the state so that we're all on the same page. So in addition to our legal, obviously the state's legal people have reviewed it as well.
Anything further? All right. Is there a motion to authorize me to sign, allowing us to enter into this MOU?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, recusals? Hearing none, motion carries. All right. Item 5.2, consider and take possible action to waive the bidding and purchase two 2019 Ford Police Interceptors from Crowley Ford at $57,654. It should be noted that that is lower than the Connecticut state contract price.
Correct. As you know, we've always tried to save as much money as possible in purchasing these cars. And as you also know, the state contract price is not always the cheapest. It's the easiest, but not always the cheapest. We're recommending that the purchases go through Crowley Ford. We will save between the state contract price and Crowley on these two cars $549.10. So I would recommend the purchase go through there.
Each car?
No,
Grand total. Okay.
This has been approved and recommended by the Board of Police Commissioners, and we're looking to have the Board of Selectmen approve it.
And this is part of your normal vehicle?
Normal vehicle replacement. These are the
schedule.
two that were scheduled in the 18-19 budget.
Okay.
We purchased from Crowley before?
Yes.
Yeah, the name. Okay. Is there a motion?
Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
And a second?
Purchase these vehicles.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, recusals? Hearing none, motion carries. 5.3, consider and take possible action to waive the bidding and contract with Soli's Garage, if I pronounced that correctly, to provide equipment and uplift for the two 2019 Ford Police vehicles at a cost of $24,245, which also is lower than the Connecticut state contract price.
Right.
Chief?
As you know, we've used this contractor in the past. The advantage to this is their location, but beyond the price. So let me get to the price. The difference between the state contract price for the two cars, upfitting and equipment, is $1,758.14, $1,758.14. So in doing that, we would save that money. In addition, we've used the state vendor before. They're located in Middletown. In order to get our cars serviced, it requires two officers to drive to Middletown, drop off car, come back. Anytime a car is going back and forth, it ties up officers. This vendor's closer. They send records and transport the cars back and forth. They're cheaper, more responsive, and more convenient. It just makes sense for us, and we're recommending we go with them.
Everybody all right with that? All right, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, recusals? Hearing none, motion carries.
Thanks very much.
Chief.
Nice job, the other day. So who won the challenge?
Well, we all went in. We all went.
We all won.
Or we all won.
Item 6, Facilities Engineer Steve Nydorf. And 6.1, we're going to consider and take possible action on an emergency elevator work for Town Hall, and I'm going to let Steve fill you in on the details.
Good morning.
Good morning, Steve.
As you all know, we've been in progress of updating the town elevator at the Town Hall. When we started, we noticed there was water coming into the pit. It typically hasn't been a problem in the past, but with all the rain we've been getting, groundwater's higher, it's been leaking. Right now, the elevator, isn't being used. Now would be the ideal time to have a company come in and seal it. If there's any water in the pit, when the state comes in to inspect it, it will not pass. So we'll have to have them mobilize again and come down with a cost to us of, between $1,500 and $2,000. So now seems to be the ideal time to have somebody come in and seal it. Talked to Standing Building Committee, and they prefer to do it as a day-by-day basis. So they'll come in and start polyurethane sealing. They'll drill in, seal it. We'll go at the end of each day. I'll inspect it and decide whether or not they need to come back the next day. 3 days maximum. Maximum cap on that is $7,200. As part of that, I'd also like to put a sump pump in. That would be as a backup. Now's the, benefit time to do it because the elevator's down. We're not paying the elevator company to come and shut it down and stand there all day. So now would be the cheapest time, the best time. It would be all set for the future. If it leaked this time, it could leak again and, after multiple rainstorms like we've had. So I'm just trying to be proactive and get this all set.
How much is the sump pump?
$8,500 max. Again, there's a cap on that.
So that's in addition to the $7,000?
Correct.
Why not just the sump pump?
Because then you're always going to have the water continuing to go through. You don't want to burn out the pump. The pump itself is over $3,000. It has a circuit board in it that detects any oil. If there's any oil, an alarm goes off and it shuts down, so you're not, polluting groundwater.
Did Scott Ornstein approve?
Yeah.
Yes, he did. He CC'd Matt.
Scott Ornstein, the
Yes.
chair of the Standing Building Committee, was brought in on a consult basis last week. We discovered this in the middle of last week.
Correct.
And we reached out to Scott. Scott is completely behind this methodology, and we're doing this on an emergency basis because without going out to bid, we're using the current elevator contractor, who has already been vetted, and we're comfortable that they'll be able to produce the kind of work we need. So, other questions?
How much water are we talking about?
This morning there's 6 inches in there.
Wow. That's not seepage.
We pump
that's
it out
water.
every day, and it's just continually coming back in.
We are pumping it out
Yes.
right now without.
Yes, because that way I get an understanding of how much is in there. So we pump it out every morning.
Yeah, it's not seepage, that's water.
That's water.
It-
The water table's rising.
I've been here 11 years. I've seen it, flood maybe twice. This is by far the worst it's ever been. I think it's the high groundwater.
So the original work that's being done, is that done?
No.
No. It's mostly done, so I have a window of like a week and a half to get this done. So the contractor's all on board. I think Pam already has a certificate of insurance. So it would be the ideal time to do it, where there is no additional charge to us.
So the paperwork's in process, the actual work hasn't started?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Hearing none. Is there a motion for us to proceed with the work as described by Steve Nydorf in the amount of not to exceed $7,200 and not to exceed $8,500? Is there a motion?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion?
Just one more question. Is this something that could happen to other elevators in other town buildings because of the excessive rainfall?
Absolutely.
Are you on that?
Yeah, it's just
I'm
hard.
sorry, I just,
Yeah, typically when you're elevator contractor, he has a special key to get into lock.
Okay.
So, that's how we found it, as soon as he came and opened it up.
Well, the elevators around the green are particularly susceptible because of the low sea level there.
Correct. But the one at the town hall is the oldest, so I'm sure yours were laid out.
Well, I'm not just thinking of the libraries, I'm thinking of here and any place
And the
else.
community center as well.
Yeah.
All right, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. Steve, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Item 7. Fire Chief Charlie Hershaw, consider and take possible action on a resolution authorizing the first selectman to sign the 2016 Homeland Security Grant Program Region 2 Memorandum of Agreement.
This is
That's
the
a
annual
mouthful.
thing that we do every year at this time. It's for the funding for the 26 towns of Region 2 in the area of about $1.2 million, which we do receive some money from that.
Okay, good. Questions? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Make the motion to approve this grant application and MOU.
Second that.
Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, recusals? That was easy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Accepting money is easier.
Yeah, right.
Item 8, Town Engineer Janice Blasiak, 8.1, discuss and take possible action to set a public hearing date of January 7th, 2019, at 8:30 a.m. at the Guilford Town Hall.
It's actually at the community
I was going to say, assuming that the elevator is working, we're going to make it at the community center to consider enactment of the following ordinance, and that would be an illicit connections and illegal discharges to municipal storm drainage systems, as well as amendments to the floodplain management ordinance, Chapter 174, and the solid waste and recycling ordinance, Chapter 236. Having some fun with ordinances, huh?
Yeah.
Just want to briefly go over what these are.
Sure.
So we'll understand.
So the first ordinance is a new ordinance. It's called the Illicit Connections and Illegal Discharges to Municipal Storm Drainage Systems. It's a requirement of our stormwater permit, which is the MS4 permit that the state has with Connecticut DEP in order to operate our municipal stormwater system, which consists of our catch basins and pipings and culverts in town. And this is to provide us a mechanism to be sure that anyone discharging to that municipal storm drainage system is doing so with clean waters and not anything that is considered to be detrimental to the environment or hazardous material or causing any problems such as grease or something like that. So it's been a requirement for the permit since its inception in the early 2000s. The first round of the permit, most towns didn't really comply with it because it was no one likes putting in ordinances unless you really have to, because it obviously puts on some additional work to the town, and primarily my office will be the one that will have to enforce this ordinance. Any other questions?
It's funny. You need an ordinance to prevent illicit connections and illegal discharges. I mean, how's that not already prevented?
Well, it's really sliding the responsibility down to the town. For the most part, the state would respond to these types of things. I think in some instances, the health department has some oversight where they can kind of utilize whatever regulations or authorities they have as well. But this really tries to take it and consolidate it at the town level and be very explicit in terms of, what we can do and what we can require.
And what would the primary enforcement mechanism be?
Well, let's see, spelled out in here, where you could actually, cite the person, you can fine the person, and there's also obviously the appeals ability on the behalf of the person.
Which town employee would be doing that? Zoning enforcement?
No, that would be the town engineer.
Third person singular. Very nicely done. Okay, got it.
Mm-hmm. There'd be a hearing process.
Well, she would issue a citation, and there's a process set forth in statute for.
Got it.
Yeah, that allows due process, etc. Yeah.
So will you be doing monitoring or acting on complaints? How would you get involved with a situation?
It'll likely be both. So if there's a complaint, someone sees somebody dumping something in a catch basin, we'd follow that up. Obviously, our public works crews are out there working a lot in our drainage systems. If they come across a problem that something strange is happening, we would investigate it. And this would give us the ability, when we identify what we suspect to be a source, to actually go in and inspect, do any testing, things like that, whereas we would have to ask permission necessarily, and to be able to go and do these things. This will give us that authority to do that and follow through. And there are times, people dump a lot of
antifreeze.
They could, hopefully not, but they can dump oil, they can dump antifreeze, they can dump grease. So restaurants have been found in the past to dump, their grease instead of having it picked up. Even, soapy mop water isn't supposed to go, any kind of gray water discharges. People can do illegal connections from their, certain facilities out of their homes or businesses, like washing machines or their sinks, right, to a catch basin instead of through their septic system. If we find those types of things, obviously that would be covered under the health code as well. We can, kind of have a way to investigate and, if need be, team up with the health department.
Under statement of purpose, could you speak to 1.3.0 where it says, to discourage development in a floodplain if there is any practical alternative to locate the activity, use, or structure outside of the floodplain?
All right. I think you're looking at the
Floodplain
flood ordinance.
Okay.
That's
the next one.
next one.
All right.
Yeah, this one's a shorter document.
Are we good on the illicit connections and illegal discharges? All right. The next one is the floodplain management. Charlie, Charlie's got the first question.
All right, I'll just kind of summarize some of the key points of the change. The state was coming out with a revision to have our floodplain management ordinance coincide with some recent building code changes that occurred as of October, and so it was timely that we had already, and myself and Pam started working on a revision to catch up on some past revisions from the state as well. And so in doing so, I was reviewing our ordinance and trying to implement some of the changes from the state, and then it just became apparent it was easier to just use the new model ordinance from the state and kind of replace ours in whole. But a lot of it is very similar to what we had before. Some of the key changes that are occurring are that we're going with a 1-foot freeboard across the board for all flood zones in town. So it's not going to just be elevating or being compliant to the BFE with the base flood elevation. It's going to add 1 additional foot on for any new structures or substantial improvements in the floodplain.
Can I just ask a quick question between there? Are the maps of floodplains changed at all?
Not since 2013.
Okay.
Yeah, the latest maps.
So this doesn't include any changes in the mapping at this point?
No, those were changed. Those are produced by FEMA, and those were done in 2013 with a wholesale review of the coastal area. The other changes that we're doing is we're treating the coastal A zone, which is an area along the coast that is considered to have some wave impacts to a point, as a velocity zone construction standard, and that's a requirement of the state building code as well, so we're updating to be kind of consistent with that. Another change I'm making is really looking to encourage resiliency when people are doing particularly remodeling projects in town. Currently we have the minimum 1-year time period that we're looking at for when people are doing improvements to their home as to when it would then justify making it a substantial improvement in terms of the amount of the cost of the project relative to the value of the structure. In this, I'm recommending that we go to a 5-year time period. It'll discourage people from kind of phasing their projects and trying to work around the compliance issue. That's a prevalent problem and tactic that I've seen in my 12-plus years of doing floodplain management. So it is something that I employed in my previous position, and I found it to be very helpful in really encouraging people to plan out their projects properly to include compliance with the floodplain management. I think those are kind of the key changes that you'll see here, but like I said, we basically took the whole new model and from the state and replaced our old ordinance. But a lot of it was more because of nomenclature and changes in some of the vocabulary that's currently being used compared to our old ordinance, and it was very difficult to write in the new changes, so it was just easier to update it and review it. It was reviewed by Pam as well as Peter Barrett in terms of its consistency and some of the...
Does this address, probably more of a planning and zoning issue, but I guess planning and zoning gets some of their authority from this type of thing. Again, to that question I had asked earlier, I don't think it's been as much of a problem in Guilford as it might have been in other communities up and down the East Coast, anywhere, I guess. But the issue of, again, like you said, additions or buildings in the floodplain, you see some of them being built now, you know, I don't know, it's 7 or 8 feet, whatever the high water mark is or whatever. Does this address that type of thing also, or is that a planning and zoning issue?
No, this is a requirement by ordinance to be compliant with the base flood elevations and to create elevated structures, or in the case of commercial properties, you're allowed to have flood-proof structures. And so, yes, so where you see people actually lifting homes, that's all relative to floodplain management in this ordinance. It's not.
And the maps are the same, and they're existing, and there's no question anybody purchasing a piece of property will know whether or not it's in or near a floodplain and that type of thing.
Well, they should.
Well, I mean, that's, you know, it's always the discussion, and,
right.
you know, like Sandy pointed out, even downtown here is got.
We have a significant area of the downtown area is in the floodplain. I do want to point out that, you know, it's a twofold impact to a property owner. They're required to have flood insurance if they have a mortgage on the property if their home is in the floodplain. And so in order to participate in that National Flood Insurance Program, we have to do our part, which is the floodplain management. And so we do get audited by FEMA. We do have to prove our compliance to FEMA and the state floodplain manager that we are, you know, managing the floodplain. And so, you know, I'll work with people when they're planning projects or buying homes and advise them as to, you know, what I think they are in terms of floodplain and what the requirements are. The town has successfully, actually, we just found out last week, we got the official word last week. There was a letter, I think, back in April that says that we're participating in the CRS program, which means that by being vigilant with our management of the floodplain, that, you know, the ratepayers for flood insurance will see a decrease in their flood insurance rates by 5% because of the level of management we're doing right now, and we'll continue to see if there's ways that we can increase that management and gain more points for how we're doing it in order to maybe potentially save people even more money on their flood insurance. So the floodplain management doesn't exist alone. It works in conjunction with the National Flood Insurance Program.
Are we opening the town to any potential liability by including 1.3.7 to ensure that potential buyers are notified that property is in a flood hazard area? Would somebody, you know, be able to purchase a piece of property? You know, to your point, we hope they do. Hope they know whether or not it's in or near a floodplain. But by putting a line like that in an ordinance, are we opening the town to potential liability that we didn't notify them that they were in flood?
That's more of a legal question, I think, but certainly whenever anyone contacts me with requests for understanding of whether a property or
well, I can appreciate answering a request, but that isn't what this is. This says ensure that potential buyers are notified. So it would be, I'm asking whether or not we're placing a liability on the town by including a line like that. I think it's a good idea, but I don't know how you end up.
I think that's a good point that you raised. I mean, we could soften that a little bit.
Are there requirements?
Well, I don't know if I want to soften it or find a way to do it.
Are there requirements with in real estate requirements in terms of disclosure?
I would think so.
I think that's probably where you're going to find it, and it's probably covered in the state statute.
There's probably a disclosure requirement, but there's also when anyone is going for a mortgage. I mean, granted, this wouldn't include people who are paying cash, but if anyone's going for a mortgage, the mortgage lending company is required to do a review of the property for flood insurance requirements because they're not legally allowed to offer a mortgage without the flood insurance policy in place. If it happens to be in the floodplain.
But I mean,
right? No, I understand. I agree. It's strong language, so perhaps we can soften it, like Pam had.
Well, I'm not so sure I want to soften it as much as find a way to do it.
Well, we're not.
But, it does open.
We're not in the middle of those
potential,
transactions,
I
though.
mean, it is interesting because the forms that we began with these ordinances, they come from the state or Yukon or whatever, and in my mind, there was a lot of overreaching and kind of the
They're all well
obligations of
intended,
the
but you
engineer.
never know about
Right, so we-
unintended consequences.
Right. So we had to soften some of the language that was coming from the state anyway, because it was like, you guarantee this and you promise that, and we took away all that when you see under her obligations under the engineering section. But I guess I feel because it's a statement of purpose and not, that's more of the general intro,
Okay.
that we could probably leave it. I think when we get to her specific obligations, we've softened that a lot.
Yeah,
so
I think if
feel
we
pretty
spelled out and the mapping is accurate and readily available,
Yeah.
we're probably covering
Right,
ourselves.
and arguably a homeowner, has some due diligence obligations.
Right, and the mapping is available through our GIS system, and I will work towards trying to get the actual physical maps available through the website as well. They're in digital format from FEMA. You could also go to the FEMA website to just type in your address, and it brings up the map for you, and it's a very easy process to really check.
When you say that this basically supersedes, where we have been before, okay, and you basically transplanted from the state or whatever to establish or to write this ordinance. Are there any other specific changes that have been made that we want the public to be aware that this is? I mean, it's one thing to codify what is already existing and what is already in process and what is logical and covered by other boards and commission. But does this expand anything that we should notify the public about?
Yeah, I think the main thing is that difference in the time period we're looking at for substantial improvement, which is going from the 1-year time period to the 5-year time period. Because that's the one that is
As far as the mapping, we've already talked about, that's under control. Everybody knows where the maps are. And what they have to do as far as controlling them, that becomes building issues, right? I mean, building permit issues as far as what the heights are and that type of thing.
Actually, there's a process that I'll be implementing with this new ordinance for an actual physical application. Right now, it's kind of included in the building permit application. But from my review, I believe we need to keep separate records of applications for floodplain construction, as well as issuing them separate permits for the work.
The question I'm trying to ask, though, have we changed any of the requirements for a building in a floodplain?
Just the ones I outlined to you in the introduction.
Okay, I have no further questions.
All right, move on to solid waste and recycling.
Okay, for solid waste and recycling, probably need a little help from Pam. She took this one on, and then we worked together on it. But again, it was to really just update the ordinance. The old ordinance spoke to some things that are no longer in place, like the Connecticut Resource and Recovery. And so we basically took a wholesale change to the solid waste and recycling ordinance, but in keeping with how we need to function here in town with the transfer station operations and encouraging the recycling and such. And then there was a separation. The other old ordinance had combined in it the litter, and so it's kind of separate, keeping it separate for solid waste and recycling.
Yeah, and just to add to that, there were a number of statutes that basically need to be cited, updated within our old ordinance, a lot of them dealing with recycling obligations. So you'll see a lot of statutory cites, just so the public is aware of those requirements. Sometimes it gets kind of lost upon the public when they're, hidden in state statutes. And there is also, the town by statute has obligations to gather information from commercial collectors, which is a defined term. And, we set forth those statutes as well. There's annual reports that the commercial collectors are supposed to file with the town. It's another example of the state kind of pushing it to the municipalities to kind of oversee these collectors. So that's all in it. And then the litter was, we had a very, very old ordinance on its own on litter, and it just seemed to make sense. And now there's a statute on that, so we just got rid of that ordinance. We used the defined statutory terms. And that's it.
Any questions on that?
Thank you.
Is there a motion to set the public hearing notice to act on these three ordinances for Monday, January 7th, 2019, 8:30 a.m. at the Community Center, 32 Church Street, Guilford, to obtain public comment and consider the enactment of same? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Call a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. Thank you.
So as things stand, that's January 7th, public comment.
In the morning.
In the morning. If I remember to give it, I'll give it time for that. All right, 9.
And in the meantime, it's just not to drive this point home. It'll be available on the town website if people want to read these?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Item 9, Finance Director Mary Jane Malavasi and Human Resources Director Mitch Goldblatt to discuss and take possible action to award RFP 3-1718 Pension Investment Consulting Services. I'll let you give the background and
I'd
on the
like
process and
yes,
the decision.
Exactly right. That's exactly where I'd like to start with the process that we went through, this very important decision for our pension committee. We had a subcommittee of the entire pension committee which started work March 30th. So, this is not a decision we've made lightly. We sent out an RFQ on July 26th. It was a 17-page document requiring an enormous amount of information from all of the firms. The proposals were due on August 17th. We received 11 bids. The subcommittee, again, met with all of the 11 bids and narrowed that selection down to 5 firms who were brought before the entire pension committee for interviews. After that, the committee chose 2 finalists. They came in for second interviews on November 21st. The attachment that you have under this item is that presentation by the firm that the pension committee is recommending the award. I'd just like to give a brief criteria for the award. They were looking for accuracy, thoroughness, responsiveness to everything that the town had asked of them, municipal public sector experience, a long-term, consistent, successful performance, familiarity and experience with management of investments for municipal and public pension plans, and of course their fees. Within those 5 things, there are a myriad of information that the pension committee requested information and required additional questions when they all came back for the interview. In the end, the pension committee unanimously are recommending Fiduciary Investment Advisors, commonly known as FIA, and I was not at that meeting, so I'm not able to. Mitch is going to take on the ball here.
And a couple of quick things. Mary Jane gave you a great synopsis of what transpired, and we had some excellent proposals, making it a difficult decision to get down to the 5 and then get down to the 2. But the pension committee, Steve Copps is here as a member of the committee, worked very hard at this, and as Mary Jane said, the recommendation was for FIA. It was a unanimous decision, and I will say that Christopher Kachmar, who is the Chief Investment Officer and Managing Partner of FIA, is here today. If there are any questions for Chris specifically, you've been given, as Mary Jane said, a copy of the final presentation that they gave, and I think, without getting into too many details that might have been discussed in executive session because it was interview process that took place, I think the issues that made FIA stand out as the top candidate were especially their municipal experience. You can see it on your presentation on page 8 that they currently manage over 70 municipal pension portfolios here in Connecticut, of which 13 are clients between $50 million and $100 million clients, which fits our criteria. In addition, they have experience working with clients with defined contribution plans, which, as you all know, we've been transferring over to, and especially we had concerns about OPEB and the fact that we need to put together an OPEB trust in the near future, and they have experience with that with over 35 OPEB trusts that they have worked on. The final reason I think that the committee was very comfortable with FIA is that that not only are they established here in Connecticut, they specialize in this work. There are no ancillary side businesses that they also take on. This is their one and only job and responsibility, and I think the committee felt very comfortable with them. And today we, on behalf of the pension committee, we come to you asking for you to help us engage them officially, since the Board of Selectmen have to, and Matt would have to sign a contract. And I know that Pam has been working, in her office, has been working on an agreement between the town, making the documents official between FIA and the town of Guilford. And this would be subject to, your motion today would be subject to the finalization of that contract.
Steve, is there anything you want to add as a member of the pension committee?
Well, I will say that of the last, two that we sort of, two finalists, both were very, very qualified. What struck it for me, or helped me make the decision, was the fact that when we asked specific questions in advance and said, we want you to talk about these when you come back for the final interview, FIA actually had the answers all typed out for us. And it's just one example of how they really, when they were answering things, trying to answer questions based on us rather than them. Mm-hmm. And I think that really made a difference. Also, FIA seems to be growing, and when I hear that firms are growing, I always, get concerned about the proverbial wall where you don't have the staffing to do what you need to do, and they're doing it very. They didn't tell us what the plan is, but they said they have a plan, and one of the key people at the other firm has now joined them, so that was another factor for us.
Good. Any other questions?
Is it a solely based? I see all the involvement in Connecticut. Is it? And your address is Windsor. Are you a Connecticut company?
We are.
And how long have you been in business?
We've been formally in business at FIA for 12 years, and a senior group of us worked collectively at a previous firm for 10, 15 years prior to that.
A previous firm that did the same thing?
Did the same work, yeah.
When you say you're a Connecticut firm, okay, I thought I saw something about Wellesley, Mass. You just signed some lease or something.
We
Is
do
that
have a
just the
couple
main
satellite
office?
offices,
Oh.
but the primary group is in
Okay.
Windsor.
All right.
Anything else?
No, I'd just like to say that for me, it's not our job as the Board of Selectmen to choose the pension advisor. It's to trust the process and understand all the hard work that's been done by the pension committee and yourselves. And I'm comfortable with that.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything further? Anyone else? No. Is there a motion to award RFP number 3-1718, pension investment consulting services to Fiduciary Investment Advisors?
I'll make that motion.
Second it.
Call a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Recusals? Motion carries. Hearing none. Chris, congratulations, and we look forward.
Look forward to working with the town.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So, Chris, thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Steve.
you.
Thank you
And the rest of the committee for us.
for its work. Yep. Okay, item 10, consider and take possible action on a resolution for the Connecticut Small Cities Community Development Block Grant Program and authorize the first selectman to sign all documents related to the grant program. I think you're familiar with, this is something we've been working towards for quite some time. There had been some delays in the state's processing of the awards. We are at that point now where we need to sign documentation so we can actually draw down on the funds and allow Lisa Lowe and Associates to start moving forward with the application and the building process, actually the rehab process. As you may recall, in our preliminary application, we had letters of intent from 43 residents in town who felt they may meet the income thresholds that would qualify for these housing improvement projects. So there's a demonstrated need in the community, hoping that the award, which is now $442,000, up from the $400,000 when we originally made the application. You'll note on the document, the financing plan has a total number of $452,000. There is $10,000 in there, which are in-kind town services. I think Mary Jane, Pam, et cetera, my time on it, and whoever else's time, and Tammy's. I'm sorry, Tammy's time. 10 probably doesn't get close to it, but it's a tremendous program for the community. So I'm asking that you authorize me to move forward with signing all documents related to that program. Questions?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the local assurances, and you've mentioned the number of times you've gone to COG and the benefit of that, and then there's a provision in here that it says a copy of this application has been submitted to the Regional Planning Authority. Is that who they mean?
Yes.
Okay, and that's happened, I presume?
It has.
Of course, thank you.
Anything further? All right, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained, recusals?
Did we have a motion?
We didn't have a motion, that's right.
So moved.
Second.
Nicely called.
Call the question. All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals? Hearing none, motion carries. Item 11, appointments and resignations. Act on recommendation to move Steve Goldsmith from alternate to regular member on the Marina Commission for a term to expire November 30th, 2022. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
And a second?
Second.
Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained, recusals? Motion carries. Item 12, request for use of town property. Act on a request for Columbus House to use the green and to place a sign on the green advertising its big sleep out taking place April 27th, 2019. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Lou, is this going to be one of those things we have to do?
I managed to avoid it when my kids were doing it.
But you've got all the camping
I
gear
might
from your Boy Scout
have a chance
days,
to put the gear to use.
Although I don't think you're allowed to use that.
You're
You're supposed to be cardboard boxes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
You have to earn points to even get those.
Right.
All right.
No,
All
no
right.
gear.
All right, we have a motion?
Bummer.
And we have a motion?
I'll make the
And a
motion.
Second.
Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, motion carries. Item 12.2, act on request from the country school to place a sign on the green advertising its open house taking place January 27, 2019. Sign placement is January 13th through the 27th.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. Act on request from the Guilford Holiday Food Drive to place a sign on the green advertising its food drive taking place December 15th, 2018. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
And a second. Just an editorial comment. During this time of the year, it would be appropriate for all that have the means to take the opportunity to make contributions of this type, whether it's to this organization or others, to benefit those in our community who are less fortunate than we are. Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Recusals? Hearing none. Motion carries. 12.4, act on a request from Pierce Real Estate to place a sign on the green advertising its holiday coat drive taking place through December 22nd. Sign placement December 10th through the 22nd. Is there a motion?
So moved.
I'll second it.
And a second. This is a good opportunity to clean out your coat closets or buy new ones and drop them off. So call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, motion carries. Hearing none. Item 13, I think we had one item in there. Was it one? Actually, it's really two pieces, but it's one piece of business. I had a discussion with Tom Banish at the South Central Council Regional Governments meeting last Wednesday, where he indicated that Madison had been approached by Department of Public Health about the opportunities for regionalized health department. Madison and Killingworth both signed a letter of intent with DPH. It's a non-binding letter of intent to explore the opportunities, what the revenue assistance will be from the state, and I think we need to take a look at it, and I have already submitted a letter, which is copied, where you guys are copied here, indicating that we are willing to explore the possibilities. This does not commit us to anything other than opening up discussions to determine the feasibility. I do have some concerns. Typically, when economies of scale are formed as a result of multiple folks taking place, the folks at the bottom usually wind up getting a little more resources, and the folks at the top wind up having less resources. So I anticipate pulling together a substantial amount of data relative to the impact on our health inspections and our processes, as we have 2 full-time employees, and I don't think either Madison or Killingworth has that. With Guilford being the largest of those 3 municipalities, including the highest demand for the Department of Health Services, inspections, evaluations, etc., we need to make sure that we are not going to diminish the level of service that's expected by residents and businesses in town. So, but I will be moving forward with that. And if it comes to that, that we put together some kind of committee, anyone who wants to participate would certainly be welcome to do so as a committee member on that. I've already alerted Dennis Johnson is fully apprised of this, so this is not a surprise to him. These discussions have started and stopped over the years, and one of the things that we need to consider, other than good government and looking for opportunities to consolidate, it's probably better for us to get ahead of the curve relative to the impacts, because it's only a matter of time before the state pushes something down. And we've heard some discussions along those lines. In fact, 2 years ago, one of the budget proposals was to create, the state was going to create regional health districts and then charge an assessment per community. And the numbers, because we were going to get lumped into a Greater New Haven health consortium, and the cost to us to participate, which is the dues per capita, per household, would have driven our costs up by nearly double what we're currently paying for to run our health department. So, but information is helpful, and I think this is an opportunity for us to start there.
Yes.
Any other comments on that?
No, thanks for getting that started. I mean, regionalization is a continual issue, and it's a good goal.
Yep, thank you. Any old business? New business? Public forum, limited, pardon me?
Did you want to go for the clear glove under old business?
Oh, old business, that's right, I'm sorry.
It's on the.
That's right, that's right.
Where is it?
Item 1. Mary Jane, come on up. I'm sorry.
Come up again, but
That's right, that's right. As you may recall, back in the springtime, late winter, early spring, we started talking with an outfit called ClearGov. These are folks who are working towards greater transparency in municipal budgeting data and information. We, as a early adopter, joined forces or signed up with ClearGov. I think you guys approved that back in the spring. And we finally rolled out the data. Mary Jane and I, predominantly Mary Jane, have been working to ensure that it is accurate. I think that's the biggest thing, and it reflects what our budget truly is. So we have last Friday, I think, but we're announcing it today. It's live, so that you can take a look at the 2018 budget detail.
Yeah. So what's on there? There is historical data back to 2014. It is linked from the state's unified chart of accounts system. So still kind of dealing with a couple little issues there, but the data is pretty clear. The data that we have supplied for them, the 2018 budget is currently on there. The Actuals will be loaded once our audit is complete. So at the moment, you only see the budget for 2018, but hopefully by the first of the year, the actual expenditures and revenues for 2018 we will load. What's also on is the current 2019 budget. Again, will remain as the budget until that is audited. But what we are hoping to accomplish throughout the budget process moving forward for 2020 is to utilize this mechanism for the public to see our budget as we move forward. So I can't 100% explain how we might, move through that process, but we're working with them. We're working with them to get that, so possibly the department head budget would go on first, and then we load it. So we're kind of working through those issues, but just another way that the public can see the budget as we're working.
What's available right now, and how do people see it?
What's available right now is up through the 2019 budget.
Okay, and how do people get to that?
There's a very long URL, but we're going to be loading a button onto our website.
Okay.
So I was hoping to talk with them, today, tomorrow, to get that up and running. I can email you the.
That'd be great.
It's a very long URL, but
Okay.
the button available for the public, I would say hopefully by the end of the week or earlier, we'll have that button.
And that'll be
hopefully
on the first page of the town website.
I would think so. I know you
Tracy?
talked to Tracy about it as we were going through the process, so we're prepared to move forward with
And
that.
people will understand what that's a chance to see the budget.
Yes, yeah.
In,
Yes.
in a digestible way.
And it's
Cool.
and it's fairly straightforward. But we could, if we weren't in this room, we had hoped to be in the selectmen's meeting room, and we would have demoed it, and we can certainly do that at another meeting if you guys would like to do that.
That would be nice,
And
actually.
you may have said this and I missed it, but are other towns in Connecticut and other states using this? Are we early?
You're a perfect straight man for that question.
Oh,
One
good.
one of the reasons I was attracted to this was even though they don't have a substantial number of Connecticut-based clients, will eventually be able to do comparisons to other communities like ours. So you'd be able to go to Branford and say, how much are they spending per capita for public works? How much are they spending per capita for fire services versus what we're doing here? Not that everything is going to be an easy straight line comparison, because everybody's budget's a little bit different, but it gives you an idea. It's going to give you an ability to compare you against other communities, and typically we use the education groupings, right?
Right, and I believe, and we're able to pull that information now, again, as I mentioned, that the data, prior year data is coming in through the Unified Chart of Accounts system through the state, so they're able to pull up all cities and towns who have complied with that mandate, and
But that data is usually a little older.
it's a little old, and
2017 's the last year.
I just know from working with other finance directors that don't quote the state 100%. Sometimes the way they pull in our data, for instance, we have revenue offsets in our expenditure budget. At the moment, the state is not applying them in that way. So I'm working to try to make that change. So when I say our data, our old data is not exactly 100%. It's really for those reasons. They have the right numbers. How it's being presented may not accurately reflect. So now that I know how we're utilizing it, I'm working with UCOA to make sure that our data is properly perceived. So you will see data from other towns, but again, take it with a grain of salt. It's how the state is uploading the data, and it might not be 100%. The numbers would be correct, but maybe it's not loading up exactly to the right. For instance, our animal control is part of police originally. If you go to the state, they've pulled it out. It doesn't accurately reflect what our animal control is, because they don't even know who our employee is. So that's just an example. I don't want to say the state's information is wrong, because it's not. It's just maybe not how we present it.
It's not apples and apples
It's
necessarily.
Correct. I'm hoping I'm saying that well enough, but
Just for the town side, or will it include Board of
Right
Ed?
now, it's just the town Board of Education is working towards uploading their data as well.
right now you will see our Board of Education figure, because it is part of our overall budget. but the detail
Yeah.
behind that number is not there.
Before the 1920 budget process that we're about to start.
That's our hope, is to
Possibly.
have them part of it.
That is our
Dr.
hope.
Freeman,
Good.
in a recent email exchange, he indicated he was going to get on his team to get up to speed.
Great. Okay.
But step one, we're up and running, and hopefully, it'll be helpful.
Great.
Great.
Thank you.
That's great.
Thank you, Mary Jane.
Thank you.
New business. None. Public forum, limited to 3 minutes on any issue. Someone to talk. And the drill's the same. Name and address for the record. Come up, yeah, please. Come on up.
My name is Linda Harrington. I am an educator. I live in the town of Monroe, Connecticut. And today I'm here to seek a solution of the fate of Simon. To my understanding, a boy entered his neighbor's yard without permission, and unfortunately, he was bitten by the dog. So the first thing I did was I look at the situation. The dogs, we have dogs for protection. They protect our property against home invasion. We have dogs that go overseas to protect our armed forces. We have dogs that protect our canines, protect our police officers. So we use dogs as a source of protection. When a dog sees a threat, he naturally protects us. I have a Jack Russell. There was a bobcat in my yard. He ran after it. He was okay, but my point is they would die for us. He would have gotten killed. So as an educator, I always say life is an experience, and we learn through our experiences. And I can give you a scenario. A group of youths were playing in a shipyard, and there was a chain fence, and the wiffle ball goes into the factory or the chain fence, and you see there's a little sliver, and you run up to the gate and you say, well, I could slide through here and I can get my wiffle ball. So the youth slides through there, and behold, he meets up with three dogs. So it was a bad decision. He wasn't vigilant around his surroundings, and we all need to be vigilant around our surroundings today because it's important. Airports, schools, museums. So unfortunately, in this case, the boy was playing lacrosse, the ball goes into the yard, and he wasn't vigilant of his surrounding. He knew, in this case, there was a dog that lived next door, but he went up to the property and decided, well, I'm going to take my chance and go get my ball. And the sad thing is he was bitten by the dog because dogs do protect us and our property, and if a dog sees a threat, he's going to, like my dog, Jack Russell, saw the bobcat, they're going to do what they normally do. So it's a sad situation here, but we learn by our choices. This is a learning experience. So I'm here because this is a family pet, and he brings obviously a lot of love and joy to a family. We all have children. We've all grown up with dogs, animals, cats. Dogs are loyal and they protect us. So killing the dog isn't going to bring justice here. So if we can come to a compromise to make everybody feel secure and confident, some type of compromise, whether it be a new fence or someone said people are walking around with sticks and they're afraid of the dog. Well, maybe he went to training. I would love to have a trained canine on my street. Some kind of compromise to break these barriers down so everybody can move forward and be happy and start the new year a right way, because it would be nice to. And I came of this situation because we ended up having an end of the year school debate, and I gave it students' choice, and this is what they chose. I had no idea this was happening in your town. But after debating it with them, and I had to play the ugly side because nobody wanted to play the other side. So after having a debate with them, these are things they came up with. And they came up with a long list, and I don't want to take my 3 minutes. But they've come up with a very long list. And this is a problem that it can be solved. It's just something that we can all work together. And there's no losers here. It's only a win situation if everybody can just compromise, and it'll be cost effective to you in the long run too. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you very much, and have a happy holiday, everyone.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address?
Hi, Sue Perkins, and I'm from East Lyme. I've been following this for a while and haven't been able to make any of the meetings, and this time I could. If I look at all of you, you all have children, or you have grandchildren, and if there was an intruder that you felt was going to harm one of them, you would do something about it. Whatever it took to protect them, that's what you would do. That's what dogs do. They're loyal. They're loyal to their family. They're loyal to their property. And if there's someone that is not going to, that doesn't belong to be in there, not to mention that there was a fence that was supposed to be protecting the dog from leaving the yard to go after anybody, this person came into that dog's property. Had no business there. The dog doesn't understand that that kid was coming in to get a ball. All that dog knows is that this person doesn't belong here, and I have to protect the people and my property, because that's what I'm here for. Animals aren't property. They're not a possession. They become a family member. And I could get very emotional right now because I've just lost 2 dogs within a year from a problem. One had a heart problem and one just died of cancer unexpectedly 7 weeks ago. And there isn't anything in the world that I wouldn't have done to keep these animals alive. I've spent thousands of dollars bringing them to Boston to get treated because they're a family member. I love them like I love my kids. If you were to come in and uproot my children because they did something like that, what would you do? How would you feel? These people go to bed every night without their dog. This dog is living in a cage on a concrete floor. He should be sleeping in a bed with his family. He shouldn't be there. And you've got to have a heart, like you've got to understand that dog was not in the wrong for protecting its property and protecting a person that came into a yard that it didn't belong there. And I don't know what or how long or why this is taking this long for people to come to that determination. It's not fair to the dog. And I don't care what kind of breed it is, because you could have a Chihuahua that would have attacked somebody, maybe can't bite as hard, but certainly any dog is capable. I've owned Golden Retrievers, I've owned German Shepherds, I've owned medium-sized dogs. Any dog, it doesn't matter. They're going to protect what is theirs, and they don't know the difference. So what I'm basically asking for is, yes, if there needs to be a compromise as to how that dog goes home, try and come up with something, but don't keep the dog any longer. Give the family a Christmas present that would be wonderful for them, because this is heartbreaking. It breaks my heart to know that they go home every night and they don't, you know what it's like to walk into a house and not have the dog greet you at the door? When I go home every day and I don't have the dog greeting me, and to know if I knew that I had a dog that was being kept by a town and I'm losing out on that opportunity. Not to mention they don't live very long. They don't have a lot of years. So you've robbed the family of a year of time they could have spent with this dog, and the dog may not even have that much longer to live. How you can take a life of a healthy pet when people just do everything in their power to keep their dogs alive when they're sick. How do you do this? You've got to have a heart. You've got to I don't know anything about the family with the dog, with the kid that got bit, whether or not they have some hold over the town. I don't know what's really going on with all that. But it's not, you have to have real justice, and the justice is the dog was not wrong, and that kid was.
All right. Thank you very much.
Please let the dog go home for Christmas.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else wishing to address the board?
Good morning. My name is Suzanne Frenier. I live in Vernon, Connecticut. And I took the day off from work today and drove an hour and a half to come be a voice for Simon. I've been following his heart-wrenching story from the beginning, and I'm struggling to understand why he hasn't been released to his family. Over the years, I've volunteered with several animal shelters, helping to rehabilitate and find homes for abandoned and abused pets. During that time, I've interacted with many breeds of dogs from different types of upbringing. From what I've been reading and photos and videos I've seen of Simon, he's not a threatening or vicious animal. How many of you have dogs? How many of you would want your dog to protect you from harm? That's all Simon was doing. He was protecting his family from a perceived intruder. He didn't break free from his fence, nor did he leave his yard, which is secured not only by an invisible fence, but by a physical fence, which the teenager damaged to enter the yard. He was trespassing on private property and should be held to some level of accountability for his actions. There had been an adult in Simon's yard. Why didn't the teenager ask the adult to toss the ball to him instead of trespassing? Then for the town to take Simon from his home and hold a private meeting to discuss actions to be taken against Simon without representation from the family. Is that the appropriate way to handle the situation, any situation? Should you not have representation from all parties present to discuss something of this nature? The only crimes I see committed were the trespassing by the neighbor, the closed-door meetings held by town officials, and the complete disregard of Simon's family's constitutional rights. Simon is an affectionate family dog. He was rescued 8 years ago, and he's loved. He's very well treated. He's up to date on his shots and registered. He loves people, his family, and other animals. His family even hired lawyers to defend him. That's how much he's loved. I can't imagine having to live this nightmare. Think about if your pet or family member was wrongfully taken from you and kept from you for more than a year. This family has had to live with the threat of having a member of their family put down. This is unjust and inhumane. Please do the right thing. Think about your pets and your family. What would you want done? Please give Simon back to his loving family. Thank you for your time. And I have a letter from somebody, if I may read it.
You've got about a minute left.
To whom it may concern, I'm writing this letter on behalf of Simon, the beautiful dog who was wrongfully placed on death row. I've read the story. Although it was very unfortunate that the young man got bitten, he did trespass onto Simon's property in a threatening and forceful way. In fact, forceful enough to break the fence that the owners had there for extra security. He is a dog, not a human, and looked at this forceful entry as a threat to the person who was out with him, his dog brother, his owner's family's property, and a threat to his safety. He did what any dog would do, try to protect his family and the property. Did the young man who trespassed into the yard damage the fence get any repercussion for his actions? I understand Simon's dog sitter was in the yard when this incident occurred. Why didn't the boy just ask the sitter to retrieve the item for him instead of just barging into the yard? Simon was in his own yard, not his neighbor's. It's extremely unjust for Simon and his family to be separated and punished the way they are for something that never would have happened if the young man had not rushed onto their property. I've seen many pictures of Simon, and he looks to be a very gentle, loving, loved and extremely well taken care of dog. He loves his family, cats, the other dog, and his human family, and they all love him. They deserve and need to all be together. Please do the right, kind, and moral thing and let Simon go home to his family where he deserves. Sincerely, Pauline. I can't pronounce her last name.
Where's Pauline from?
She's from Enfield.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having us here today. It's Catherine Adams, Guilford, Connecticut, 250 Dromore Road. I've lived in Guilford for 3 years so far, so I'm still getting to know the process, so bear with me. I'm passionate about dogs. I could repeat everything that's been said, and instead of doing that, I'm going to be a little bit more efficient with my 3 minutes and address some of the ordinances that we have at our disposal to use in this situation. Disposition. CGS 22-358H allows the commissioner, after the hearing, to make changes, modifications, or adjustments to what was discovered or deemed. In this case, he was deemed to be euthanized. We can review that. It is up for discussion. I would like to actually look at that, being that this is time for me to talk and not ask questions. I would love the opportunity to actually hold a meeting and discuss this. And if it's not appropriate for me to meet with anyone individually, I actually request a public meeting so that we can go over the ordinances of Connecticut and Guilford if they're any different. I'm not sure if they are. I do believe we nod to the state in this case. And I really do believe there's so many questions that are not understood. And there's the understanding by the general population that there's lack of transparency. It behooves us as a town to be clear. We don't want to set a precedent of opaqueness or wrongdoing. It does not reflect well upon any of us as people. So I really request some transparency on this so that we can move forward and do what's right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to address the board?
My name is David Young. I live in Guilford. Long-time resident for, 13 years. No, actually, 15 years now. And I'm a physician, and I'm an upstanding citizen of Guilford, again, for a long time. All my kids have gone to school here. And I've always taught my children to, be reasonable people, come to reasonable solutions. We talk our way through things. We don't kill things. And my appeal to you is that reasonable people come to reasonable solutions. And there's been many dog bite cases in every town in Guilford that I've actually reviewed, and many of which were unprovoked. Those dogs are still alive. Those dogs had history of previous bites. Simon does not. Simon has never gotten out of his yard. We had him for 8 years, up to date on everything. And the only thing I can come up with was why this is not transparent is who's got authority, who's got a hold on the town to that extent that this gets shut down, and there's justification to spend the amount of money of taxpayer dollars, of Guilford taxpayers, to carry this through. I was willing to put up a larger fence, and I was told not to. I was threatened by the chief of police to let this go quietly. Don't cause any trouble. That's a threat. He threatened me and my wife. What does that mean when someone says that? Don't do anything. Let this go. How would you take that? Ms. Renner, at one of the first meetings I came to, you suggested an executive meeting to kind of have this discussion. I don't know if that ever happened, but it appears that got shut down. I appreciate your gesture. Simon has overwhelming support. I mean, this sets a very bad precedent. Again, many of us have dogs, many of you have pets. Whether fenced or not, they're going to protect you. Especially the small dogs. They're pretty tough. For the precedent being, someone comes into a yard, the dog perceives a threat, especially holding a stick. Now, as a human, I understand. I see that person coming in. I know who they are. As a human, I wouldn't necessarily perceive a threat. Simon was in the yard with his dog sitter. She didn't know him. Startled her, but it also startled Simon, and he perceived a threat, like any dog would. Again, reasonable people have reasonable responses, and I think the response to chant kill the dog is not reasonable. And clearly they've tried to follow through on that threat to kill the dog. Who has power over the town to have that kind of influence to allow this to go on as long as it's gone? Again, taxpayers of Guilford look at this and are appalled at, the precedent it sets. Are we not safe in our own yard? What if Simon had bit an intruder had a gun who meant harm, he would be hailed as a hero. He doesn't know the difference. He was protecting. I have, several letters written by Guilford residents. This one, Simon is, this issue with Simon is proven to be an embarrassment to the town of Guilford. Had the dog bit a robber or home invader passing through the yard, he would have made the front page news as a hero. But we have local youth who trespassed on private property carrying a cross stick, and the dog is the villain. Please, I respectfully request you put this to bed. Release the dog with an order of conditions to include a certified trainer evaluation, which that would be awesome. I'd like to have him trained now because he's kind of getting out of practice being in that cage, I visit him several times a week. Reschooling, this person is a longtime Guilford resident. And, this story and the cost of taxpayers has made news all over New England and all over the world, really. Please do the right thing. And so, there's many letters. I'm a Guilford resident and want Simon reunited with his family. The way this town has handled this situation was wrong. There's no reason it had to be like this.
Dave, you're running out of your time. Would you submit those letters to us directly?
Sure.
Probably an easier way to do it.
Mm-hmm. But, I'm just appealing to you to do the right thing. And you do have the authority to do the right thing as first selectman of the town. The Department of Agriculture has appealed for us to come to reasonable solutions. It is, they don't want to do. They don't want anything to do with this. So, according to the Connecticut state statutes, you do have sole authority to make the right decision. I can only wonder why that hasn't happened. I can only guess who has the kind of influence they must have. And, I hear deafening silence. And this will not go away until we make it go away. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's appropriate for a point of clarification. This matter is currently being adjudicated by the Department of Agriculture. In fact, a hearing was canceled because Dr. Young and his attorney filed suit against the Department of Agriculture on a remediation meeting. So the town of Guilford is awaiting the next steps from the Department of Agriculture. Anyone else wishing to address the board?
Certainly would. Hello, Cindy Vaporis, Alpine Drive, East Haven, Connecticut, United States of America. The statement that you just made, I was at that meeting. Okay, I was at that first meeting. Actually, one of your members asked to be notified of that meeting. I'm not sure if they were, because they had wanted to be at the agriculture meeting, but I didn't see any of you folks there. Okay, I was there both times. We were refused entry into the second meeting, and that meeting was canceled because of the supporters and the decision makers that Dr. Young brought with him. He was asked to bring all decision-making materials. We're it. I do this 24/7 to help Simon. Okay? I'm in it. I'm in it. Okay? That meeting was canceled because we were there and we were refused entry. After that meeting, then the legal forms were filed. So I'm sorry, I needed to correct you on that. I was there. All right? The Department of Agriculture said at that first meeting, and it's televised and recorded, okay, that they would prefer that the town and Dr. Young work this out between themselves. Okay? You guys have nothing to gain in this. Nothing. Nothing. This is nationwide. I have letters, and I will be printing those off too, from people in Arkansas. Okay? I know you don't care. They're not Connecticut residents. There was a television show, Judge Judy, on last week, and it was about a process server
who I'm very familiar with process serving because I worked with a deputy sheriff for 13 years, okay? That process server went onto that property and got bit, tried to sue the homeowner, and you know what Judge Judy told him? Even though she's a television personality judge, she still is, as far as I'm concerned, a legal judge, told him, you didn't belong on that property. Hit the road, Jack. Okay? This kid didn't belong there. You know it. I know it. The world knows it. Okay? I have a lot of friends in the animal community. A lot of them. I spent my Saturday night in Fairfield for a vigil for 5 dogs that some human being didn't care enough about. Okay? And left them to rot. Their skeleton remains were left and found. Okay? By a cruel human being. These are humans right here that care about their dog. I've been to see Simon with Dr. Young. I've been there. I know he goes 2, 3, 4 times a week because he always tells me, because I want to know. They won't let me see Simon. Okay? That's fine. That's how you want to do it. That's fine. The law is 14 days. 14-day quarantine. Okay? This is simple. Make this go away. Be the heroes. Mazza was a piece of crap.
That's the end. That's the end.
Sorry.
Your 3 minutes is up. Thank you
Yep,
very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, personal insults.
I didn't mean to make it a...
No, you did, though.
Okay.
You
I
did.
understand, but let me
No,
just
you're done.
apologize
You
now.
were. Thank you for the apology, but your
Well,
3
I
minutes
just
is
wanted
up.
to apologize for that. It was emotion. I'm sorry. I do apologize. I do.
Anyone else wishing to address the board? Hearing none, and it's public forum. Item 18, discuss and take possible action on a personnel contract. An executive session will be required. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Who are we inviting?
Aye, sorry.
We're inviting Pete Barrett, town council.
Anybody else?
That's it.
Anybody else? Tracy, no?
Nope.
Okay.
You'll be coming back for a vote.
We'll probably be coming back for a vote, yeah. Good chance. Is there a motion to come out of executive session?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. During executive session, we discussed the personnel contract, and that being for our in-house counsel, Pamela P. Millman, and it has been negotiated at length over the last several months, and I believe we're at a wonderful place. Pam's value to this community and to me personally and to this community has been demonstrated time and again, and I believe that we've got agreement that we'd like to move forward with this contract. Is there a motion to do so?
I'll make the motion to allow you to approve the contract.
Any further discussion or comments? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. Thank you all. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And time for Lou to get out of here.
Do you need these letters from